Let me open by offering a story I remember hearing that was shared with me quite some time ago by an interfaith colleague at the Morris Area Clergy Council. It was an episode from when he was a new pastor in another location, and this is how I remember it. This new pastor received a call to come to the bedside of one of the elders in his congregation, a pillar of the church. She was on her deathbed, and she wanted him to come for a visit. Now, he had a fair number of commitments that day, but of course, he shifted things around and went straight to visit with her. When he arrived, she seemed to be asleep. Now, he didn't want to disturb her rest, so he waited quietly and patiently by her bedside. But he couldn't stop thinking all the while about all the things that remained on his to-do list. After a while, he looked at his watch to see just how much time had passed. At that very moment, she opened her eyes and quipped, "Do you have somewhere more important to be?" Flustered and jolted to a new level of wakefulness, he said, "No, you are right. I am here." He then took a deep breath and sat with her, this woman who he had begun to love, this woman who meant so much to the people he served. He turned his heart towards prayer and his full body towards presence. Those were her last words, and they shaped the minister he became and the quality of his presence. Here we are, you and I, in this community of people who practice what it looks like to extend love and care in this village that we have chosen to cast our spiritual lot with. Here we are, who show up for one another during and on the other side of good times and bad times, and who also show up for one another and for our families and friends in the event when we do draw our last breath. Having said that last part, let me remind you that no one in this room is on their deathbed. Yet some of you who will listen to this on the podcast are struggling with health issues, serious enough to keep you at home or in the hospital. Some of you are wondering whether the end is near and having nothing to do with the coronavirus. Some of you are feeling fear about whether the end could come as a shocking surprise for you or for someone you love because of the coronavirus. Here we are, on the edge of a week that feels especially liminal in space and time, deeply aware that our presence in space and time is oh so precious, oh so finite. Our access to global news has us coming face to face with our mortal nature on a regular basis. As of earlier this morning, about 106,000 people have tested positive around the globe with the novel coronavirus, and about 3,600 of those who were diagnosed have passed away. The numbers of people diagnosed in the United States this morning reached 426, and of those, so far there are 19 who have died. Our hearts, prayers, and presence does go out to all who are suffering, to the first responders and to their family and friends. Our state of being mortal, though, as opposed to immortal, has actually not changed by much at all over the last couple of months. But nothing shakes our confidence or brings out fear like uncertainty. I remember meeting a psychologist at the Career Center in Princeton when I was undertaking a career assessment and a psychological profile test for becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister. Gosh, it must have been about 17 years ago. I was blessed to receive a strong recommendation that my vocational orientation was a great fit with ministry. But on this typed up report, she had decided at the last moment, this psychologist, to add a handwritten asterisk in the margins, and she wrote, quote, "Cancer survivor, risky investment for her denomination, uncertain future." Yeah, I was. Never mind the fact that my doctor had given me a clean bill of health on the health form with no qualifications. Never mind the fact that I had been a survivor for about 20 years when she met me. When I called her up on the phone to ask her about it, and, by the way, to tell her that cancer survivors are covered under the ADA laws, it turned out that she was uncomfortable and saddened by the notion that I had gotten such a serious cancer as a teenager. My life story somehow confronted the order of things for her. We don't like our sense of control over how much time we have to be confronted. Modern medicine, including treatments for things that were always a death sentence before, gives us an illusion that we can count on more time, whatever that means to us. While it is true, many of us will have far more time than we would have before modern medicine, we still don't ultimately know or get to decide how long we have. Some of us will live a short while, others a medium while, and others a long while. And the answer as to what constitutes short, medium, and long will always be in the eye of the beholder. In this season of Lent, a time of fasting and prayer, giving up and letting go, I invite all of us to let go of the illusion of control over how much time we will be allotted, and to turn our hearts towards presence. What ultimately matters is how we spend the time we have and what we make space for in our lives, however long or short. I can testify to you as a minister who has been involved in many memorial services right here in this pulpit, in this chancel. People don't testify to the number of days. They testify to the way their loved ones spent their days and to how they received that love and to that person's quality of life and how they gave it away every day. I hate to lift up what may be more troubling news, but again, it's about shifting our perspective so that we can focus on the here and now, which we do have. This moment, this breath, this time. Shifting our perspective to the here and now, to the ones we love, and to a life that proves worthy of that precious gift of time. 10,000 people have already died of the flu in the United States this year. My own family was devastated when we lost my uncle last year to the flu, in the year he started retirement and in the year he moved back to the United States. Again, deep breath. The coronavirus is novel, but viruses ending in death is not. And yet, I too am worried about losing someone else I care for and love this year. I too am grieved to see a death toll rising. Lent also turned out to be the 40 last days that Jesus lived, although he wouldn't know precisely when the end would come. At least the Jesus I believe in wouldn't have, as a prophet, but also just a mere mortal, a man. Just like Martin Luther King or Einstein or Sojourner Truth or my friend Angie, who was so often a roommate of mine on the pediatric ward of Memorial Sloan Kettering. Even if it looks like the end is near, reprieves happen. People survive cancer and viruses and heart attacks and all kinds of situations and live to ripe old ages. And even activists who threaten the empire are not all doomed to be assassinated by the state. We just don't know whether we'll have more time or less time than we hope for. And more time than we hope for can sometimes be a burden too, if the quality of our days are filled with pain beyond measure, the evaporation of memory, or not being conscious. Here is my Lenten meditation, which I offer to you this morning. Teach me that I am mortal, so that I may not squander this day. Teach me that I am interdependent, so that I may ask for help when I need it. Teach me that I am made for love, so that I may show up for others when they are in need. Teach me that I am made for hope, so that I may reach for what once seemed impossible. Teach me that I am made for now, so that I may give away all that I am and never hold back. I offer in closing a story that comes from the Sufi tradition about a mantra and a path for when times of trial and deep challenge are before you. A king asked his wise men in the court, "I am making a very beautiful ring for myself. I have got one of the best diamonds possible. I want to keep hidden inside, under that diamond, a message that might be helpful to me in a time of utter despair. It has to be very small so that it can be hidden underneath the diamond in the ring." He was surrounded by wise men who were all great scholars. They could have written great treatises, but to give him a message of not more than 2 or 3 words, which would help him in time of utter despair, they thought, they looked into their books, but they couldn't find anything. The king happened to have an old servant who worked for him, who was more of a father figure. He had been his father's servant. The king's mother had died early, and this servant had helped to take care of him. So he really wasn't treated like a servant. He was more like family. The old man said, "I am not a wise man, knowledgeable, or scholarly, but I know the message, because there is only one message. And these people cannot give it to you. It can only be given by a mystic, a person who has realized themselves. In my long life in the palace, I have come across all kinds of people, and once a mystic. He also happened to be the guest of your father, and I was put into his service. When he departed, as a gesture of thankfulness for all my services, he gave me this message, and he wrote it on a small piece of paper and folded it and gave it to me, and now I do the same for you. Don't read it. Keep it hidden in the ring. Only open it when everything else has failed, when there is no way out." And the time came soon. The country was invaded, and the king lost his kingdom. He was running away on his horse just to save his life, and the enemy horses were following him. He was completely alone, and they were many. And he came to a place where the path stopped, came to a dead end, and there was a cliff and a deep valley below. To fall into it, that was the end. He could not go back. The enemy was there, and he could hear the sounds of the hooves of the horses. He could not go forward, and there was no other way. Suddenly, he remembered the ring. He looked under the diamond, found the paper, opened it, and read the small message, which was of tremendous value. It simply said, "This too will pass." A great silence came over him as he read the sentence. This too will pass. And it passed. Everything passes away. Nothing remains in the world. And the enemies, it just so happens, who were following him must have gotten lost in the forest, must have chosen the wrong way, because slowly the sound of the hoofs got lighter and lighter and lighter until you couldn't hear them any longer. The king was immensely grateful to the servant and to the unknown mystic. Those words proved as if miraculous. He folded the paper, put it back into the ring, gathered armies once again, and conquered his kingdom back. And the day that he was entering his capital victorious, there was a great celebration all over, music and dancing and glee. And he was feeling very proud of himself. That old loyal servant was walking right beside his chariot and turned to him and said, "This time is also right. Look at that message." The king said, "What do you mean? Now I am victorious. People are celebrating. I am not in despair. I'm not in a situation where there's no way out." The old man said, "Listen, this is what that saint said to me. This message is not only for despair, it is also for pleasure. It is not only for when you are defeated, it is also for when you are victorious, when you are liberated, when you have joy beyond imagining. Not only when you are last, but always also when you are first." So the king opened the ring, read the message. This too will pass. And suddenly, the same peace, the same silence amongst the crowds and the noise, amongst the jubilation and the dancing and the music. But this time, the pride, the attachment, and the ego was gone. After all, this too will pass.